I sat down with some of New Zealand's sharpest economic minds and one of our leading social scientists to ask them one simple question: is New Zealand's economy going broke? Bernard Hickey says we made one fatal choice.
Our collective choice as an economy, a society, to become a housing market with bets stacked on, that we've really bet everything on this housing market.
Shamubeel says that is wrong.
We've always had a real economy beyond housing. I think that's always been a bit of a myth.
A demographer told me the warning isn't just about money, it's about people. And the cost of getting it wrong, our people are leaving.
I call it the great escape valve. And at the moment, it's an escape valve that looks like an A320 a day.
This isn't a story about the end of New Zealand.
It doesn't mean everything is going to hell in a handbasket. It's not. There's lots of good things we should celebrate.
Because the people who can fix this aren't in government.
We will get through this. Focus on what you can control.
In the end, Bernard left me with the only question that really matters.
Where do you think your kids are going to grow up? And if you're looking at this failing economy, if you think of it like an engine with an exhaust pipe where, there's spurts of flame coming out and there's black smoke and it's a bit ugly, well, that's the part of our economy where people are being spurred out the back. They're going across to Australia because they can.
If you had to assign a number to the Asian financial crises, the global financial crisis, the COVID, and now that, what number would you give it?
Well, if you're doing if I was doing the Asian financial crisis,
yep.
Nowadays I'd probably look at that if you're doing it out of 10, maybe about a 3.
Right. Okay. That's quite light.
Yes, in retrospect, it feels like it now.
Like
the global financial crisis, that was up probably around about a 6 or a 7.
Right.
The Canterbury earthquakes were a lot more localised, but very profound there.
Yeah.
COVID was a major shock.
Mm.
You'd put that around an 8 or a 9, but the thing was it ended up being short-lived, which was a real saving grace.
Right. Yeah.
This one, you're probably talking about up there around a 9 out of 10.
Shamubeel, are we in an economic situation where we're in trouble? Are we in trouble?
Yes, I think we are. I think everything is more uncertain than it has been since many decades ago. No generation has had to deal with this for some years, some decades. Mm. And a lot of it is that grief of letting go of what we've been used to and trying to figure out how to deal with this world that's less certain. There is more volatility, more uncertainty, and everything feels like it's pressing down on you. It doesn't mean everything is going to hell in a handbasket. It's not.
So why isn't the economy growing like it should be? And we've been told that it should. And it isn't just the war. You're right. It's been slowing down. It's been sluggish really since about 2022. We obviously had this boom, if you like, in activity, spending, in 2021 and 2022, when there was a lot of stimulus coming from the government. We also had, at least in 2020, end of 2022, 2023, we had quite a bit of migration. So people coming in or coming back, that helped stimulate things. And we had a shortage of workers, so wages went up. And there was quite a bit of growth through that period. And actually, when you look at New Zealand's economy over the last 20 or 30 years, it's only really in the last 4 or 5 years that it started to slow down substantially. And if you look at the GDP growth per capita, and that's the way we should look at these things, it's really been flat to negative since 2023. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, but the main one is that our collective choice as an economy, a society, to become a housing market with bets stacked on, which was what we really chose to do in the 1990s. Without really understanding it, we sort of stumbled into it. And for a long time, it worked really well. If you owned property and if you bought property from really the 1990s onwards through the 2000s and the 2010s, and in that amazing period in 2019-20, when the market went absolutely nuts, it felt like, well, this is the right way to do it. This is great. We've got all of this leveraged tax-free capital gains. Why would you invest in anything else? Just buy another rental property or buy another house or just sit there and wait for the value of the land to rise. And for a lot of people, they're actually still way better off than when they first bought their homes or their land in the 1990s and 2000s. If they bought in 2022, they're not. And we're at that point now, 2026, 4 years on, where people are going, I've been waiting for the rebound. I've been waiting for things to get back to normal for forever, and it's just not happening. And why is that? And in my view, it's the fundamental problem in our economy that we've really bet everything on this housing market. Our economy, which used to do quite a bit of exporting, and, we had quite a few manufacturers, we had quite a few businesses that employed a lot of people doing things, creating things and services for a lot of people, and we still do. But compared to other countries, Australia, Singapore, Denmark, Finland, places that, are a lot like us, similar size, similar background, similar legal systems, similar political systems, we're just not performing as well as them. And there's some fundamental reasons. It's not just the lack of a capital gains tax. It's also the lack of incentives to invest in other types of investment. So in most other countries, when you're working, the government will subsidize you, or at least give you a tax break to put money into a pension scheme. So, for example, Australia is the most obvious example where you can put savings into your pension scheme, and that savings is not taxed when it goes in. In New Zealand, you have to pay tax before you put money into the scheme, and also you have to pay tax while the money's in the scheme. You don't get tax when you pull the money out. But in a lot of other countries, you get a tax break going in, and often you get a tax break while the money's in there. So what you have is, in most other countries in the world, incentives or direction or encouragement from the government of the day to put money into pension schemes, which often invest in companies and in infrastructure and in what you could argue are real things, real businesses, real jobs, real factories, real products, services, data centers, whatever it is, and also to lend money to businesses and sometimes governments in the form of bond issues. There's a lot of investors that put money into, let's say, a pension scheme in Australia, and it will lend money to a company in Switzerland that's building a new motorway or whatever. But that money is not going into residential land. And so in most parts of the world, there is a capital gains tax and a subsidy to put money into a pension scheme. And what that means is you have much more vibrant and heavily invested in real businesses and real infrastructure and networks. You don't have quite such heavy investment in residential land.
We've always had a real economy beyond housing. I think that's always been a bit of a myth. We are quite obsessed with property, and a lot of our wealth is tied up in property. So roughly speaking, about half of our wealth is tied up in property. That's very high. And that means that we're not investing in other things that would actually make us richer. Like my personal belief has always been that you cannot expect to create good jobs and prosperous society if you don't create good businesses that create those opportunities, right? Buying and selling houses from each other is a necessity. We got to have shelter, but it doesn't create jobs. It doesn't create that long-term prosperity.
Do you think the story of the housing story of use the house to grow your wealth is potentially over?
It does feel like it. It's certainly last few years have been very, very hard to make money out of housing. It's been going sideways. Rental market has been very tough. Rents are falling in many parts of New Zealand. So being a landlord now is actually quite hard work. And so if you don't have the capital gains and you're not making money in terms of growth in rents, why are you doing it? Whereas the risks for business haven't gone away, but the potential rewards are still there. Because it's within your control, right? With a business, if you put in your work and you get lucky, both of those things matter.
Of course.
If you can do those two things, then at least you've got some agency.
Well, I think a big concern for us in New Zealand is our decline in productivity. So one of the things we do is we use immigration. I'm very much in favour of immigration, but at times we use immigrants to avoid having to confront issues of technology use or productivity gains. We often go for a short-term sugar fix, such as immigration, to fix a gap rather than thinking, could we actually do this
right.
onshore
right.
using new technologies in a much more effective way?
About 20% of global oil supplies and gas supplies as well are no longer being produced or shipped. And fuel is not an energy. It's not something where you can just easily stop using it for many of our things. And so we are suddenly facing into, hang on, this is something like a bit like, okay, you've got to go on a crash diet and stop eating 20% less food and have 20% less coffee. It's something where it takes quite something to adjust to for something that's so fundamental to your daily life. Well, I had some people in my team go through and do some work where they look at how oil prices flow through industries, which industries heavily use oil. It's things like your transport, your logistics areas, agriculture, some manufacturing would be some examples of sectors where they're likely to be impacted a lot more because they're more reliant on fuel directly or more reliant on people who are heavy users of fuel. In contrast with service sectors, less exposed. There'll be some indirect exposures, but it's a lot less. So you can think about it broadly speaking. Anybody who's relying on stuff being moved around, and also to some extent people who are relying on retail spending as well, you'll get some differing impacts. And some other people in my team did some work just looking at, well, how do consumers respond when you have a lift in oil prices? And the results were pretty understandable. You end up spending more on fuel, you end up concentrating on spending on the essentials, and it's discretionary spending and some durable goods. And by durable goods, you're thinking, say, furniture, appliances. Ordinarily you think cars, but we've got people rushing to buy EVs at the moment for the right reason. But people switch their spending patterns as well, and that has ripple effects.
And that's one of the reasons why there's this desperation for lower interest rates, because I think that might start things again. I don't think that actually makes a difference. We've borrowed as much as we can, or as much as the Reserve Bank will let us, and therefore the game is over. And trying to get it going again is actually pointless.
If you're running a business, one of the best things to do at the moment is think through different scenarios, like what might be an okay scenario, what will be a bad scenario, what could be the worst case scenario, and understand what that might look like for your business, and think about what actions you might need to take if you find you're going down one path over another, because that's a lot more useful than people like me sitting here going, trying to pick a date in an environment which is so fluid. So it's better to be planning and thinking about how you might respond.
So do you think, from what you've understood now, that the way to get rich in New Zealand is not through housing anymore?
I don't think so, unless you can get them to change the rules. Otherwise, we end up being an economy which essentially is a type of churn machine. We suck lots of people in, we pump lots of people out, but they don't stick, and we don't build real value.
It's like having Maccas. It's not very nutritional.
Exactly. It's a low nutrient economy. And amazingly, we now have a situation where more than 30% of the graduates who are born in New Zealand leave New Zealand permanently. We have the highest percentage of our population living outside the country, bar Portugal, and up until about a decade ago, Ireland. We have a bigger diaspora now than Ireland. These people who are leaving every year. I call it the great escape valve. And at the moment, it's an escape valve that looks like an A320 a day. You fit about 200 people in an A320. And it's made up of young families, people in their 20s and 30s, often with babies, and an interesting little group at the back of the plane who are the parents of those kids who are following them.
Because we've got some of our best and brightest going offshore. When you look at diasporas in the OECD, first of all, we have one of the highest. So as a proportion of our population living in another country, it's second only to countries like Ireland. It's really high. And the second thing is our diaspora is one of the best educated of any diasporas. So our best go offshore. And you can see that in the numbers. There's a spike in the 18, 19-year-olds leaving. That's a school leaver. And then the 24, 25-year-olds. That's our graduates.
It doesn't mean everything is going to hell in a handbasket. It's not. There's lots of good things we should celebrate, but certainly there's a whole lot of risks and a whole lot of new things that we have to get used to. To give you one example, I met this guy in Tokoroa. There are 2 firms in Tokoroa that make log processing heads. Each of these things costs like $2 million, and they're built in Tokoroa, right? Of all places, because of the forestry, because of the history of forestry. But they're exporting to the world. They're the world-class leaders coming out of Tokoroa. So you've got these 2 businesses that are extraordinary, that comes from New Zealand, and they're world leaders. And so when I see those kinds of places, I go, clearly it's possible to manufacture in New Zealand. Clearly it's possible to have the right people to do the design. Clearly we have the right people to make the thing. We have the right people to sell the thing. What's limiting us? I don't think it's that we don't have the raw ingredients. I just don't think we have those people that are bottled up and scaled up.
In 2010 or 11, I said I thought that the housing market would fall 30%. In the end, it actually fell 15%. And if you take it adjusted for inflation, it did fall 30%. But then it rebounded again. And it didn't just rebound, it doubled. And I thought it was over, that we couldn't have it anymore. And then along came COVID. And the Reserve Bank removed the LVR restrictions, printed $80 billion and cut interest rates to 0. I didn't think that would happen, but it did. It might make sense to think about the economy in the way that I've talked about it, to explain why their business is struggling.
We've gone away from debating and denial.
Yeah.
We've gone from denial to debating the solutions. And that contest is actually really good. We want to have political contest when it comes to good ideas and policies, because nobody has a monopoly on the best ideas to fix these wicked problems. So to have that contest of ideas is helpful because we want that tension. And it's also how democracy works.
So are we making more houses, in really simple terms, are we making more houses on a faster rate that we used to do, maybe like 5 years ago?
Absolutely. I mean, the rate of house building in New Zealand now is way higher than it has been in our history. Take a guess. How many people do you think started a new job in the last 12 months?
In New Zealand? 12,000?
1 million.
Oh, in New Zealand?
Yes.
Start a new job?
Yes.
Wow, that's so cool. That's good to hear.
It is good and it's bad in the sense that we have a lot of churn. So a lot of the reason why we hire people is because people leave. So we lose a lot of people because our retention is low. And so every year, we, roughly speaking, regardless of if the economy is going up or down, we're hiring about 1 million people a year.
Well, we have 5 million.
We have 5 million population, about 3 million people in work. So we're turning over the entire workforce.
Yeah.
A third of the workforce every year, which is an extraordinarily high number. My advice to all my clients over the last couple of years is go cut your competition's lunch. There is no growth happening in the economy. Any growth you have in this market is because you've taken somebody else's market share. And one of the most frustrating things I see during downturns is people stop advertising, people stop marketing, and you're like, what are you doing? This is your only competitive advantage in this market. If you're not doing that, you're shooting yourselves in the foot. And in fact, we know all the evidence is really clear. If your share of voice is high during a downturn, not only will you do better through the downturn, you'll get an outsized share of the recovery when it comes. The question isn't why are people leaving? The question is what can we do to entice people back? Why are we not investing in ourselves to give people the reasons to stay here? And we always look to the government. What will the government do? Well, I don't trust the government to do the right thing. So if the government's not going to do it, the question is, what are you and I going to do about it? And I think the people who have the ability to do this better than anybody else are businesses. We are the ones who create jobs. We are the ones who create reasons for people to be able to stay here and give the opportunities that people want. And so I still think that there is still so much faith in businesses, right? So if you look at the Edelman Trust survey that came out last year, it was really interesting. It said, we have very little trust in media, we have very little trust in government, but who do we trust the most? Our own employers.
Wow.
It's kind of the last bastion of trust that remains in communities.
I think the first thing we all need to recognise is none of us know exactly what's going to happen. We do know we're facing a period of high energy prices, high plastics prices, other things like that. We will need to adapt to that. We just don't know how long. So if you're running a business, the key things are, it's hard, don't potentially plan on, okay, this is going to happen at this point, this is going to happen at that point, this is going to happen at that point. Really think through those sort of what if scenarios. And that's where I think it's really important. Scenarios, getting a sense of what good looks like, what okay looks like, what terrible looks like, and how do we really defend and mitigate that for our business. Think through those things, a bit like, in some ways, I hate to use the word, a bit like in COVID, but we got, I think, as a country, much better at starting to understand, how there could be different possible paths that could look quite different, and thinking about what actions we would take through those, so that we're starting to make kind of more informed decisions where we've had a bit of time to think about them. So that scenario planning and contingency planning is the sort of thing that is going to get us through this. And look, we will get through this. We have massive amount of shocks over time. They are not fun when you're in them necessarily. I think the key thing is focus on what you can control. Don't catastrophize too much. Don't overreact to headlines.
When things are challenging is the moment when you innovate.
Right.
And so don't spoil a good crisis is essentially my advice. So no, innovation, and we desperately need innovation in this country. The old idea is that education is linear, primary, secondary, possibly tertiary, and labour market. No, it doesn't happen like that. We need to retrain people throughout their working life.
Where do you think your kids are going to grow up? And will their kids be able to afford or be able to make New Zealand their home and be wealthy and happy and healthy in an advanced economy way? At the moment, it's not here.